Debt shapes every part of modern life, yet almost no one truly understands the scale of the world they are living in. We wake up, go to work, pay our bills, swipe our cards, and all the while, we move through an invisible financial experiment unlike anything humanity has ever seen. To see the full picture, we have to travel backward through history and forward into the future we're heading toward. 1. The illusion of stability. Governments borrow as if numbers don't matter. Central banks create money as if value appears out of thin air. Corporations survive by refinancing loans they can never fully repay. And families quietly chain themselves to decades of obligations disguised as opportunity. Most people think this is stability. In reality, it's a system running on promises that only hold as long as people believe in them. We've built a global economy on the idea that debt can expand forever without consequence. But debt is gravity, it always pulls, and it always settles the score. 2. Ancient roots of a modern trap. Thousands of years before the first gold coins, before the first markets, before the idea of profit even existed, there was debt. Clay tablets in Mesopotamia listed every obligation in exact detail: how much grain, how many sheep, how many hours of labor. Debt wasn't financial, it was spiritual. A breach of trust was a breach of cosmic order. And when societies became too burdened, rulers didn't pretend everything was fine. They pressed the reset button. Entire populations were freed through jubilees, because kings knew the truth. A society crushed by obligations becomes uncontrollable. Ancient civilization understood a lesson modern governments refuse to accept. You cannot bind an entire population to endless debt without destroying the foundation beneath it. 3. The rise of credit empires. When Europe entered the Renaissance, debt transformed from a survival tool into an engine of power. Banking families like the Medici funded wars, influenced popes, and shaped the borders of kingdoms. Credit determined who rose and who fell. Spain, overflowing with silver, still collapsed under the weight of reckless borrowing. The empire looked unstoppable, but the numbers told a different story. Even mountains of treasure cannot save a nation drowning in promises it cannot keep. Debt had evolved from clay tablets into a geopolitical weapon. 4. The 20th century, when debt went global. By the end of World War I, nations were suffocating under obligations no economy could repay. Germany's hyperinflation wasn't an accident, it was the predictable result of crushing reparations. Money became meaningless, savings evaporated, and society destabilized so fast it reshaped the entire century. Then came Bretton Woods in 1944. A new financial architecture emerged, global currencies tied to the dollar tied to gold. Stability, or at least the illusion of it, returned. But illusions are fragile. As the US printed more dollars than it had gold to back them, pressure built. Foreign governments demanded gold. And in 1971, Nixon shut the window. With one announcement, the world stepped into a new era. Money was no longer backed by anything real. Debt had no ceiling. And the experiment began. 5. The age of endless borrowing. Once debt became unanchored, the rules changed. Lower interest rates became the universal solution. When economies slowed, they borrowed. When they crashed, they borrowed more. Every crisis was papered over with more leverage than the last. The 1980s credit boom. The Latin American defaults. The Asian financial crisis. And then 2008, a collapse built on a mountain of mortgages repackaged, resold, insured, and multiplied until no one understood where the risks actually were. The system survived, but only by creating more debt than the crisis destroyed. 6. Today, the numbers have become unreal. Global debt is now more than $300 trillion. That's 4 times the size of the world economy. Japan's public debt exceeds 200% of GDP. The United States adds trillions every single year, just to stay afloat. Europe fights to maintain balance while interest payments consume national budgets. And China hides enormous liabilities in shadow banking networks. Debt has become so normal, people forget it even exists. Until interest rates rise, and the weight suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Debt is invisible on the way up and devastating on the way down. 7. The three endings every debt cycle faces. History is brutally consistent. Every massive debt cycle ends in one of three ways. You repay honestly, painful, politically impossible. You inflate it away, the preferred choice today. You default, the most destructive option. Inflation is already happening. It quietly drains your savings, reduces your purchasing power, and makes government debt easier to manage. It's a tax disguised as economics, and most people don't notice until it's too late. And when defaults come, they don't hit the powerful. Banks are saved. Corporations restructure. Politicians move on. Ordinary people lose everything. 8. What this means for you. Understanding debt isn't about fear. It's about navigating the world with your eyes open. Recognize that debt is not neutral. It shapes economies, redistributes power, and determines who suffers when the cycle resets. Protect yourself with skills, assets, and knowledge that aren't erased by inflation or market crashes. History doesn't repeat, but the patterns do. And the pattern we are living through now is reaching its next chapter. If this expanded your perspective, hit subscribe. History won't save you, but understanding it might.